You're standing in the pro shop. The kid behind the counter just handed you a shiny new set of irons and told you they'll take 5 strokes off your game. The price tag says $1,300. And something in your gut says he's wrong. Here's what I found after 2 years of digging. That $1,300 set will not shoot a single stroke lower than the dusty old iron sitting in the used bin behind him. Not one. And for a high handicapper past 60, the truth is almost insulting in how simple it is. I couldn't let it go. I kept asking myself one question. If the technology is really that good, why are average scores exactly the same today as they were 40 years ago? So I started pulling the thread, and it led me all the way back to a strange little book published in 1968, written by scientists, not golfers, a book the equipment companies would rather you never read. That book holds the last piece of this whole case. Stay with me, because you already own everything you need to use it this weekend. Let me start where I started, with the word every salesman leans on: forgiveness. You've heard it. These irons are so forgiving. The big head, the wide sole, the hollow back, they promise that even a bad swing gets rescued. And I believed it too for years. I thought forgiveness was a modern miracle, something invented in a lab last Tuesday. It wasn't. Here's the first thing that stopped me cold. The forgiving iron, the kind with the weight pushed out to the edges so off-center hits don't twist the face, was invented in 1969. A man named Karsten Solheim, an engineer who used to work for General Electric, took the metal out of the middle of the club head and moved it to the perimeter. He called it perimeter weighting. He founded a company out of his garage in Arizona to make them. Those irons made the ball fly straighter on mishits, and they did it more than 50 years ago. Think about that. The core technology that every salesman sells you as brand new was figured out before men landed on the moon came back and the decade was over, 50 plus years ago. So I asked the obvious question. If they've had 50 years to improve it, surely today's irons are wildly more forgiving than the ones from, say, the year 2000. That has to be worth real strokes. So I went looking for tests. Not marketing claims, actual robot tests, where a machine swings the club the exact same way every single time, removing the human from the equation. Publications like Golf Digest and independent testing labs have run these for years. And what they keep finding is the thing nobody selling clubs wants to say out loud. For a golfer with an average swing speed, which is exactly who you and I are, a modern game improvement iron and a well-made iron from 10 or 15 years ago produce almost identical results. Same rough distance, same rough dispersion. The gap that would show up on your scorecard is basically zero. The forgiveness got maxed out. The physics of moving weight to the edge of a club head only goes so far before you hit a wall, and the industry hit that wall a long, long time ago. Everything since has been polish, new paint, a new story to tell you every autumn. I sat with that for a while, honestly a little annoyed. Because if the forgiveness argument is hollow, then what about the one thing everyone swears by? The one thing you can actually feel on the course. Distance. The new irons just go farther. I've heard people I trust say it. I've felt it myself, standing on a range, hitting a demo club and watching the ball sail past my normal number. And that, it turns out, is where the real trick is hiding. Because that extra distance is real, but the reason for it is not what you think. And once I understood how it works, I couldn't unsee it. Here's what I dug up, and this is where the story turns. Every iron has a lofty angle of the face that sends the ball up into the air. A steeper angle sends it higher and shorter. A flatter angle sends it lower and farther. For most of golf's history, the numbers stamped on the bottom of your clubs meant something fixed. A 7-iron was a 7-iron. Back in the 1970s, a standard 7-iron had a loft of around 34 to 35 degrees. That was the agreed-upon standard for generations. Now go pick up a brand new 7-iron today. On many of the best-selling distance sets, that same 7-iron is bent down to around 28, 29, even 27 degrees. Do you see what happened? They took the loft of what used to be a 5-iron and they stamped the number 7 on the bottom of it, so when you stand on that range and the new 7-iron flies 10 yards past your old 7-iron, of course it does. You're not hitting a better 7-iron, you're hitting an old 5-iron with a new label. It's the same trick as putting less coffee in a bigger can and calling it new and improved. The number on the club is a costume. This is called loft jacking. and it's the quiet engine behind almost every "Our Irons Go Farther" ad you've ever seen. And here's the part that made me genuinely angry when the pieces clicked together. Someone profited enormously from you never noticing this, because they can't just make one club longer that would mess up the spacing between your clubs. So when they strengthen the 7-iron, they have to strengthen the whole set to match. And a set only has so many slots. When the loft of the old pitching wedge gets swallowed up by the new 9-iron, guess what falls off the bottom of the bag? A gap opens up in your short clubs, and to fill it, they sell you, you guessed it, another wedge. Sold separately, of course, for another $150. You were made to feel like your old clubs were slow and outdated. But your old clubs weren't slow. The industry simply moved the finish line and didn't tell you, then charged you to catch up to a line that was never real. Now, I want to be fair, because I promised myself I'd follow the evidence and not just get mad. Modern manufacturing is genuinely good. The materials are consistent. But consistent and well-made describes irons from 20 years ago, too. The leap they're selling you, the leap that justifies $1,300, isn't there. What's there is a relabeling scheme and a marketing calendar that needs you to feel behind every single year. I'd been obsessed with the clubs. Which iron, which brand, which model. But if new clubs don't lower scores, then the real question, the one that actually matters for a high handicapper, is this. Where do the strokes actually go? On which shots does a weekend golfer past 60 actually bleed away his score? Because if I could find that, I could stop chasing clubs and start chasing the truth. That question is what led me to a professor. And what he found rewrote everything. His name is Mark Brody. He's a professor at Columbia Business School in New York, a numbers man, not a golf coach. And starting in the 2000s, he did something nobody had really done before. He collected data on tens of thousands of golf shots from touring professionals all the way down to weekend players shooting 90, 100, and worse. Then he built a system to measure exactly where every stroke was won and lost. He laid it all out in a book published in 2014 called Every Shot Counts. That book quietly changed how the professionals think, but almost nobody told the amateurs. Here's what his data showed, and it flatly contradicts everything the equipment industry wants you to believe. The high handicapper, the person shooting 95, 100, 105, is not losing to the touring pro because his 7-iron fly is 5 yards shorter. That's noise. He's losing enormous chunks of score in two places. The approach shots into the green from a distance, and the mess around and on the green, the chips, the pitches, the putts. Let me put it in plain terms. Buying a longer 7-iron to fix a 95 is like buying a faster car to fix the fact that you keep taking the wrong exit. The speed was never the problem, and it gets more pointed than that. Brody's numbers expose the single biggest score killer for amateurs, and it has nothing to do with equipment. It's the blow-up hole. The double, triple, quadruple, bogey. The one bad decision that snowballs. A high handicapper doesn't shoot 100 by hitting 100 mediocre shots. He shoots 100 by hitting a lot of okay shots and then detonating 3 or 4 holes. And no iron ever made, at any price, prevents a blow-up hole. Only smarter decisions do. So I sat there with all of this, the 50-year-old forgiveness, the relabeled lofts, the professor's data, and I finally understood why the salesman's promise never comes true. He's selling you a fix for a problem you don't have. So the problem you actually have stays right where it is. And a golfer who never fixes the real problem keeps coming back, keeps buying. Every autumn, forever. Now, this is the part of the case where I have to stop and talk to one specific person. Maybe it's you. Because I know some of you are listening to this thinking, that's fine for someone with time to practice, but I'm not driving to a course 3 days a week to work on my chipping. My knees don't allow it. My schedule doesn't allow it. This is interesting, but it's not for me. I promise you, this next part is exactly for you. Because the biggest score drops Brody found don't require athleticism or lessons or a single dollar. They require using clubs you already own in a way nobody ever told you to. Let me give you the 3 things you can do this week in your own backyard or on your next casual round with the exact clubs in your bag right now. And that's the moment I realized I'd been asking the wrong question this whole time. If everything I've laid out here, the physics, The loft jacking, the 50-year-old forgiveness ceiling resonates with the way you already suspected things worked. I put the full investigation into a written guide available in 3 tiers: Smart Basics, Deeper Fixes, and the Full System. Each one goes further into the evidence and gives you a practical framework you can bring straight to the course. The links are in the description below, and you can start at whatever level fits where you are right now. But let me come back to the thread, because the data gets more specific than that. The first one is a decision, not a skill. Stop aiming at the flag. This one hurts people's pride, but the data is brutal and clear. When you aim at a pin tucked near a bunker or the edge of the green, your miss goes into the bunker or off the green, and there's your blow-up hole. Aim at the fat middle of the green instead every single time, no matter where the flag is. A ball in the center of the green, 2 putts. A ball in the bunker can cost you 3 or 4 strokes. You don't need a new club to do this. You need to point somewhere different. That decision alone quietly erases the worst holes on your card, and it costs nothing. The second one saves you from the most common miss in all of amateur golf, and this is the one I want you to really hear. When Brody studied approach shots by recreational golfers, he found something almost unbelievable. Amateurs come up short of the hole the vast majority of the time. Not sometimes, most of the time. Ball after ball, round after round, we leave it short. Why? Because we all secretly rate ourselves by our one best swing. We remember the 7-iron we flushed once, and we grab that club, forgetting that our normal 7-iron, the one we actually hit 19 times out of 20, goes noticeably shorter. So here's the free fix. Take one more club than you think you need. If your gut says 7-iron, hit the 6. If it says 6, hit the 5. Almost every green is guarded in the front and wide open in the back, and almost every amateur dumps it in the front trouble. Clubbing up doesn't cost a penny, and it fixes the exact leak the professor measured. I tried this myself, stubbornly convinced I was the exception. I wasn't. I'd been short my whole life. The third free technique is for the ground around the green, and it's the one that turns a card full of 7s into a card full of 5s. Stop trying to chip with a lofted wedge that flops the ball into the air. That shot has a tiny margin for error, and when you catch it thin, it screams across the green into worse trouble. Instead, take your 7 or 8 iron, a club you never think of as a chipping club, put the ball back in your stance, and use a simple putting stroke. The ball pops over the fringe and rolls to the hole like a putt. It's called the bump and run, or the chip and run, and it was the standard way ordinary players got the ball close for generations before television taught everyone to flop it high. It's nearly impossible to hit badly. You already own the club. You already own the putting stroke. Nobody just had to tell you to combine them. None of that required a purchase. None of it required a lesson. And every bit of it attacks the exact places where the professor's data says your strokes are actually vanishing. That's the whole point of this. The fix was never in your hands as a club. It was in your hands as a choice. But here's what kept nagging at me, even after I found all this. Brody's book came out in 2014. The professionals grabbed it fast. So why did it take until the 2010s for someone to prove this with modern data? Surely, if this is really true, if scoring was always about decisions in the short game and not about expensive irons, somebody must have figured it out before. Somebody, long ago, before the marketing machine got its hooks in. And if they did, where did that knowledge go? That question is what sent me down the last tunnel of this whole investigation. And what I found at the bottom of it is the piece I've been holding back for you this entire time. Let me take you back to 1968. In Britain, a group called the Golf Society of Great Britain did something almost nobody had ever tried. Instead of asking champion golfers for their opinions, which is all anyone had ever done, they hired scientists, physicists, engineers, people who study motion and force for a living. They funded a multi-year scientific study into what actually happens when a human being hits a golf ball, and they published the results in a book titled The Search for the Perfect Swing. It was written by Alistair Cochrane and John Stobbs, and released in 1968. This book is one of the most respected pieces of golf science ever produced. Serious coaches still quote it today, but the general public, the weekend player, the person shooting 100, never heard a word of what's inside it. And what's inside it demolishes the entire premise of the expensive iron industry. more than 50 years before that industry sold you your current set. Here's the finding that made me put the book down and just stare at the wall. The scientists studied the impact between club face and ball, and they found that the collision lasts about half of 1,000th of a second, less than the blink of an eye, a fraction of an instant. In that half-thousandth of a second, everything about the shot is already decided. The ball is gone before you could ever feel it, react to it, or fix it. And here's the punchline. During that collision, the ball has no idea what brand is stamped on the club. It has no idea what the club cost. It responds only to three things: how fast the head is moving, how squarely it meets the ball, and the loft of the face at that instant. That's it. That's the entire universe of the golf shot. Head speed, square contact, loft. A $1,300 iron and a $40 used iron delivering the same speed and the same square contact at the same loft send the ball to the exact same place. The physics leaves no room for the price tag. They proved it in 1968, but they went further, and this is the real treasure buried in that book. Those scientists put a number on where ordinary golfers should spend their effort. They studied how strokes are actually distributed across a round for the average player, and they concluded decades before the Columbia professor confirmed it with computers that the enormous majority of an amateur's strokes and the biggest opportunity to lower a score live in the short game and the approach. The little shots, the ones that require no strength, no expensive gear, and no youth. They wrote, in plain scientific language, that the average player was pouring his attention into the long, powerful shots that look impressive while almost completely ignoring the short, quiet shots that actually decide the number on the card. Two independent investigations, 46 years apart. A British physics study in 1968 and an American data study in 2014 reached the identical verdict. The score isn't in the clubs. It never was. It's in the 50 yards closest to the hole, and in the decisions you make from the fairway. And the reason you never heard it isn't that it's complicated. It's that there's no product to sell you at the end of it. You can't put aim at the center of the green in a shiny box and mark it up 800%. You can't patent take one more club. So the finding that could actually save your score sat quietly in a book from 1968, while every marketing dollar went to the one thing that changes nothing, the tool in your hands. So I did the thing the whole trail was pointing at. I took my own oldest, ugliest set of irons clubs I'd been embarrassed to be seen with, and I played a full season with just 3 changes. I aimed at the center of every green. I took 1 extra club on every approach, and I chipped with a 7-iron and a putting stroke instead of flopping wedges. That's it. No new equipment, no lessons. My scores dropped more in that one season than in all the years I'd spent buying new irons combined. The clubs I was ashamed of turned out to be innocent the entire time. The problem had never been sitting in my bag. It had been sitting in my head, put there by people who needed me to keep buying. And that's the case. Closed. The technology that supposedly saves your game was finished 50 years ago. The distance they sell you is a relabeled loft. The strokes you lose are hiding in the short game and in your decisions, exactly where 2 separate teams of scientists said they'd be, one in 1968, one in 2014, and the fix has always been free, always been in your hands, always been something you already own. Here's what I want you to walk away feeling. You were never the problem. Your swing was never too old and your clubs were never too cheap. You were simply pointed at the wrong target on the course and in the pro shop by people who profit when you doubt yourself. Today you point somewhere else. If you're the kind of person who's always suspected that the simplest, cheapest, the most reliable answer was buried on purpose because the truth doesn't come with a receipt, then you and I are cut from the same cloth, and this channel is where you belong. Now do one thing for me, because this crowd reads and thinks but rarely speaks up, and I genuinely want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which of the 3 free fixes you're going to test first, aiming at the center of the green, taking 1 more club, or chipping with your 7-iron. Just type the one you're starting with. And if you learned to play back when a 7-iron was still a real 7-iron, tell me the year you started. I want to see how many of us remember the clubs before they moved the finish line. Subscribe and stand with the people who are quietly digging up the practical, honest knowledge that got buried so somebody could sell us the expensive version. We're not fans of a channel, We're a small crew recovering what earlier generations knew and were talked out of, because the next thread I'm pulling is a strange one. There's an old claim that the golf ball itself, the very thing you tee up, was deliberately changed decades ago in a way that quietly cost weekend players distance, while the marketing said the opposite. I've found the documents. I'm testing it now. And when I'm done, I'll show you the whole trail. Stay with me. I'm so glad you stayed to the end. If you'd like, come further with me inside the Old Ways Circle, where I pick up right where we just stopped. In there, you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't be alone. You'll belong with Old Ways folks like you. Just point your phone at the code on screen. Cancel anytime, one click. No risk.